Gentlemen, if you're an older man interacting with a younger woman, the stakes are different. Your wisdom, presence, and experience set you apart, but they also demand discipline, restraint, and clarity. There's a fine line between confidence and delusion, between leadership and manipulation. Never try to compete with her youth. One of the most common yet most humiliating mistakes an older man can make is trying to compete with a young woman's energy, lifestyle, or cultural trends. This need to appear relevant often stems from a deep-rooted insecurity, the fear that aging somehow makes you less desirable, less interesting, or less valuable in the dating market. But what truly erodes your value is not your age, it's the way you respond to it. When you start dressing like her peers, talking like her peers, behaving like you're in the same phase of life as her, you lose the essence of what makes you attractive as an older man in the first place. You were never meant to compete with her youth. You were meant to be her contrast, her grounding force, not her mirror. When an older man tries to act younger, it often comes off as forced, awkward, and desperate, even if she smiles politely or plays along. She may laugh at your jokes or humor your attempts, but beneath the surface, she is taking mental notes. She's observing whether you are grounded in who you are or chasing her validation. Your power isn't in keeping up with her, it's in showing her something she's never experienced. Depth, calm, confidence that doesn't beg for attention. A man who knows his worth doesn't need to borrow youth to feel alive, because he brings a presence so powerful that youth naturally gravitates toward him. You must also understand that a young woman's world is fast, impulsive, and emotionally turbulent. She's in a phase where she's still forming her identity, discovering her boundaries, and exploring freedom. If you, as a mature man, enter that world trying to match her impulsiveness or emotional reactivity, you're not leading, you're following. And no woman, regardless of her age, is truly attracted to a man who follows her emotionally. You become a participant in her chaos rather than an anchor within it. You lose polarity. A truly masculine older man understands the beauty of stillness. He doesn't seek to be the loudest in the room or the most socially active. He doesn't crave external excitement because he carries internal stability. When you're secure in your experience, values, and self-respect, you naturally stand apart from the crowd. She notices it, even if she doesn't fully understand why. That's the unspoken allure of a grounded older man. He moves slowly, speaks with weight, and makes decisions from clarity, not impulse. You don't need to understand her slang or listen to her music. You don't need to party until 3 a.m. to prove you're fun. You just need to show up as someone who doesn't need anything from her to feel whole. And here's the truth most men won't admit. Women admire what they cannot easily influence. The moment she sees you molding your identity to gain her favor, you lose her respect, and where respect dies, desire dies with it. She may use you for validation, for resources, for entertainment, but she will never truly surrender to your leadership, because leadership requires a man who is rooted in himself. Youth will always chase what feels powerful, not what feels familiar. So stop trying to shrink yourself into her generation. Expand yourself into your essence. You're not in competition with her age, you're in competition with your own weakness. And when you choose dignity over desperation, she feels it. And whether she stays or not, you stay whole. Never put her on a pedestal because of her looks. When a man reaches a certain stage in life, he's expected to have learned the difference between admiration and infatuation, between appreciation and worship. Yet many older men, especially those who have experienced emotional starvation, or a long drought of feminine attention, find themselves hypnotized by the surface level allure of a younger woman's beauty. They begin to mistake her youth and attractiveness as proof of her value, forgetting that beauty alone is never a measure of substance. And once that illusion takes over, they start offering excessive validation, unnecessary praise, and unearned loyalty. This is the trap, putting a woman on a pedestal for a gift she did nothing to earn. Her youth is not an accomplishment. Her physical appeal, while magnetic, is not a virtue. And the moment you start treating it like it is, you diminish yourself in her eyes. Older men often fall into this pitfall because they've been taught that beauty is scarce, especially as they age. So when a beautiful young woman shows even a flicker of interest, they react with panic-pouring compliments, money, attention, and emotional investment into her, as if she's their last chance at passion or intimacy. But what they fail to see is that this dynamic flips the power structure. He becomes the chaser, the pleaser, the one who is constantly trying to earn approval. And she, consciously or not, begins to test how far he'll go just to stay close to her. In doing so, he teaches her that her beauty is a currency he will forever overpay for. Ahai, Val, your man doesn't do this. He sees beauty for what it is, fleeting, common, and incapable of sustaining a relationship on its own. He understands that a woman's real value comes from her character, her emotional depth, her respect for his time and presence. He knows that beauty fades, but peace, loyalty, humility, and emotional intelligence do not. And if those qualities are absent, no amount of physical perfection can compensate. When you place a woman on a pedestal, she will either look down on you or become bored with you. Because women, especially young ones, don't fall in love with worshippers. They fall in love with challengers, with men who can see through the illusion and love them not for their surface, but for their soul, if that soul proves worthy. And let's not ignore the psychological damage this pedestal building causes to you as a man. It robs you of your discernment. You start excusing red flags. You rationalize bad behavior. You accept disrespect in exchange for the temporary high of being desired. And the longer you stay in that state, the more your self-respect erodes. You forget that you are the prize not because of your money or status, but because you've survived, learned, built, failed, rebuilt, and earned wisdom that she can't yet comprehend. You've got decades of life under your belt. Don't trade it away for a pretty face and a flattering smile. That's not love. That's self-abandonment dressed as romance. Never teach with the expectation of control. There's a subtle yet dangerous line that many older men cross when dealing with younger women. They become mentors with an agenda. They position themselves as teachers, guides, or protectors, offering wisdom, life experience, and emotional support, but silently hoping that these acts will breed dependency, loyalty, or romantic attachment. And while on the surface it may appear generous, it is, in truth, a veiled form of control. When you share knowledge with the expectation of power, you've stopped being a teacher and started becoming a manipulator. That dynamic isn't masculine, it's insecure, and nothing repels feminine energy faster than a man who teaches not to uplift but to own. Some older men confuse leadership with leverage. They mistake authority for control. They think that by helping her grow, they are building a bond that she will never outgrow. But that mindset reveals a deep fear, the fear of being left, replaced, or forgotten. So, Instead of allowing her to evolve on her own terms, they start attaching conditions to their wisdom. They become passive, aggressive when she doesn't take their advice. They become jealous when she explores her own path. They may never say it outright, but their actions scream, "After all I've done for you, you owe me." And once a woman senses that, she no longer sees a protector, she sees a threat disguised as a benefactor. The strongest men give without attachment. They guide without control. They understand that if a young woman genuinely values your presence, she will stay with or without your advice. She will admire you not because you try to sculpt her into who you think she should be, but because you respect her freedom while embodying unshakable strength. Your wisdom should be a gift, not a leash. It should empower her, not bind her. The moment she feels like your guidance is a trap, she'll begin to rebel, not because she's ungrateful, but because deep down, she knows when love is being weaponized to control. Also, when your guidance comes from ego instead of compassion, it distorts your sense of power. You start seeing yourself as the architect of her growth, and that breeds entitlement. You begin believing you're indispensable in her life. But no man is indispensable to a woman who feels caged. The more you try to shape her reality, the more she will fantasize about escaping it. And when she finally does, you're left bitter, confused, and resentful, all because you failed to give without needing something in return. If you truly want to lead, lead yourself first. Be the example. Be so rooted in your values, your purpose, your discipline, that she naturally wants to listen, learn, and align. And if she doesn't, let her walk. You're not here to control her path. You're here to walk your own with integrity. Anything else is manipulation dressed in wisdom's clothing. And a man who manipulates to feel powerful is already lost. Never ignore the power dynamic. One of the most dangerous oversights older men make when engaging with younger women is pretending as if the dynamic between them is equal, that they're just two people connecting with no underlying imbalance. But this is never the case. Whether you acknowledge it or not, there is always a power dynamic at play when a mature man deals with a younger woman. She may be beautiful and full of life, but you, as an older man, possess life experience, emotional maturity, and resources she has not yet earned. If you ignore this fact, you are walking blindly into a situation that can easily become exploitative, manipulative, or self-destructive. She may not even be consciously aware of the influence you hold. In fact, she may see you as exciting, mysterious, stable, a man who has it all figured out. But if you start treating her as if she's on your level in terms of mindset or emotional understanding, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. A young woman is often still learning who she is. She may not yet have a fully formed identity, and when an older man enters her world, he becomes a kind of mirror, a compass, even a fantasy. That influence must be handled with care. If you use it selfishly, you are not in a relationship, you are in a position of control, and she is simply reacting to your lead. The deeper issue arises when the older man begins expecting her to behave like someone with the same level of emotional insight and maturity that he has. He expects her to respond with the same logic, loyalty, and foresight. But she can't, not because she's incapable, but because she's at a different phase in life. When she flirts with other men, when she posts provocative photos, when she values attention over commitment, you can't act surprised. You're dealing with a woman who is still exploring herself in a world that rewards her for superficiality. If you don't understand this, you'll misinterpret her actions as betrayal instead of immaturity. And that's when older men start lashing out, trying to correct her behavior, or attempting to force her into their world. When in reality, they ignored the power imbalance from the beginning. There's also the financial and social power imbalance. As an older man, you may have money, influence, connections, and whether you want to admit it or not, those things can easily become tools of manipulation. Buying her gifts, offering her experiences she can't afford, funding her lifestyle, these may appear generous on the surface. But if they come with invisible strings, the whole dynamic becomes transactional. You're not nurturing love, you're buying compliance, and as soon as your resources dry up, or as soon as she finds someone who offers the same perks without the emotional demands, she's gone. Not because she's evil, but because the foundation was flawed from the start. To truly navigate this dynamic wisely, you must first be brutally honest with yourself. What does she see in you? Is it your presence, your leadership, your energy, or is it your lifestyle, your protection, your validation? What are you offering her that she can't get from a man her age? And most importantly, what are you expecting in return? If you don't address these questions with radical clarity, you'll find yourself in situations where you're constantly confused, chasing her emotional attention while ignoring the fact that she was never on the same level to begin with. The only way to protect your masculinity, your peace, and your integrity is to acknowledge the power dynamic and move with wisdom instead of fantasy. Never invest more than she does. This is where most older men fall apart, the imbalance of investment. The moment you begin giving more than you receive, more than she's earned, more than she's emotionally or mentally capable of reciprocating, you tip the scales in a way that destroys respect. And the tragedy is, it often doesn't begin out of manipulation or weakness. It begins out of genuine desire, the desire to impress, to protect, to nurture, or to be valued by someone who makes you feel young again. But that desire quickly turns toxic when you start ignoring reality. The older man becomes so captivated by the emotional high of a younger woman's attention that he begins overextending emotionally, financially, energetically, hoping that this generosity will create loyalty. But it doesn't. It never does. If anything, it teaches her that you're desperate for her presence. And desperation is the exact opposite of masculine power. When you start giving too much, constantly texting first, planning all the dates, paying for everything, offering emotional support, clearing your schedule for her, you're not building connection. You're training her to believe that she is the prize and you are the pursuer. And while the mainstream narrative may glorify this, the truth underneath is far darker. Women, especially young women, do not respect a man who overpays for their presence. She may smile, she may accept the gifts, she may compliment you, but in the background she's subconsciously calculating how much she can extract from you before you start realizing your own worth. Every act of overinvestment tells her, I'm afraid of losing you, and that fear becomes fuel for her ego, not her affection. Once she senses you're more emotionally invested than she is, she starts pulling away, testing boundaries, withholding intimacy, and seeing what she can get away with. And if you, as the older man, keep chasing, forgiving, or trying harder, you reinforce her superiority. You become the emotional ATM, the man she keeps around not because she feels love, but because she feels power, and then comes the justification. Older men, in their delusion, begin convincing themselves that their extra investment is necessary. She's younger, she needs guidance. She's still figuring life out. I should be patient. She has so much potential. I just need to help her grow. But what you're really doing is pouring into someone who hasn't even brought a cup. You're writing her emotional checks she hasn't earned. And worse, you're sacrificing your time and mental peace in hopes that one day she'll realize how good you've been to her. But love doesn't bloom from guilt or pity. It blooms from mutual respect, and respect requires balance. An emotionally mature man knows this. He watches her effort, not her words. He pays attention to her consistency, not her charm. He listens to how she speaks about others, how she reacts when he sets boundaries, how she shows up when nothing is being offered to her. And if he senses that the investment is one-sided, he doesn't get angry. He simply withdraws, not as a manipulation tactic, but as a natural enforcement of self-worth. If she values him, she'll step up. If she doesn't, she'll vanish, and that, in itself, is the answer. You must understand, investing more than a woman doesn't make you noble. It makes you vulnerable, not in the strong, emotionally intelligent way, but in the gullible, blind way. You can't love someone into loving you. You can't buy her loyalty. You can't force her to respect what she doesn't fear losing. And the only way to keep her genuinely invested is to match, not exceed, her energy. Let her work for your attention. Let her earn your protection. Let her show through action that she values your time and presence. Because if you keep pouring into a woman who isn't pouring back, you don't look generous, you look weak. And the moment you look weak in a dynamic with a younger woman, the respect dies. And once that's gone, nothing else matters. Never expect long-term security from short-term excitement. This is one of the most seductive illusions that traps older men in emotionally dangerous situations with younger women, the belief that the initial chemistry, passion, or thrill somehow guarantees a lasting bond. That because she's smiling at you now, responding to your texts with energy, and enjoying the time you spend together, she must be envisioning the same future you are. But that's not how it works. What feels exciting today may have absolutely no foundation beneath it. A young woman's attention, especially when it's sparked by novelty, doesn't equate to loyalty, depth, or long-term compatibility. And if you confuse her youthful charm with enduring commitment, you're building castles on sand. Young women often live in the present. They're in the experimental phase of life, trying new things, exploring freedom, and following emotions more than logic. One day, she may be captivated by your confidence, the calm you bring, the experiences you offer, but that fascination can dissolve overnight, not out of malice, but because she is still discovering herself. And as she evolves, her interests, desires, and emotional needs shift. What once seemed magical can quickly become mundane. If you're clinging to those initial highs, hoping to stretch them into a lifelong bond, you will end up hurt, not because she deceived you, but because you refused to see things for what they truly were. The real issue is not the excitement itself, it's the emotional projection that comes with it. Older men often project fantasies onto young women. They start envisioning a shared life, picturing her as a partner, imagining growing old together, having her soften their loneliness or fill the emotional gaps left by failed past relationships. But what they're doing is idealizing, not understanding. They're creating a version of her in their mind that may not even exist in reality. And when she eventually pulls away, changes her mind, or simply grows tired of the dynamic, it feels like betrayal. But it wasn't betrayal, it was your fantasy collapsing under the weight of reality. There's also a biological and psychological dimension to this. Younger women may be attracted to older men for their stability, wisdom, and emotional control. But that attraction can often be shallow if it's not met with emotional depth from her end. She may enjoy the power imbalance when it serves her, when it allows her to feel protected, pampered, or admired. But the same imbalance becomes a source of discomfort when she starts craving independence, peer validation, or a sense of equality. What once drew her in starts pushing her away. And if you, as the older man, try to hold on tighter, try to lock her in, try to plan a future she's not ready for, you don't come across as secure. You come across as desperate. And let's not forget the most crucial element, time. As an older man, your time is far more valuable than hers, not because you're better, but because you've lived through more. You've seen more, built more, and hopefully lost enough to understand what matters. If you spend that time chasing temporary highs, you're not just risking heartbreak, you're squandering the only resource you can never get back. Young women have time to make mistakes, to fall in and out of love, to run wild and regroup. You, on the other hand, should be moving with intention. You should be filtering through life with discernment, not diving into emotional whirlpools just because they feel good in the moment. If a younger woman is genuinely grounded, emotionally aware, and capable of building something real, that's rare, and it will show through her consistency, not her excitement. But if she's just enjoying the thrill, testing her power, or using the connection as a stepping stone towards something else, you need to see it clearly. Don't tie your future to someone who's still figuring out their present. Don't assume that passion today means peace tomorrow, because long-term security is never born from short-term excitement. It's built brick by brick through emotional alignment, mutual effort, and the kind of respect that doesn't waver with time. Anything less is a gamble you can't afford to lose. Never try to hold her with possessiveness or emotional dependency. Possessiveness is often mistaken for passion. Many older men blur the line between caring and controlling, believing that their intense attention, their constant communication, or their emotional dependency will somehow win a young woman's heart for good. But what actually happens is the opposite. It suffocates her. It begins with small things, needing constant updates on where she is, checking in multiple times a day, growing agitated when she doesn't respond quickly, or subtly criticizing her male friends or social life. These behaviors don't come from love, they come from fear. Fear of losing her, fear that you're not enough, fear that she'll wake up one day and walk away. And the moment she senses that your emotional center depends on her presence, the dynamic begins to shift and not in your favor. You must understand something fundamental. No woman, especially a younger one, is attracted to a man who leans too heavily on her emotionally. A young woman is drawn to strength, not to emotional instability disguised as affection. She might initially enjoy the attention. She may even find it flattering, but over time, what once felt like care turns into pressure, and what once seemed like love starts to resemble control. When an older man becomes possessive, he's no longer protecting her, he's imprisoning her. And even if she doesn't say it out loud, she begins to look for the nearest exit. It's also important to recognize that possessiveness doesn't always come in obvious forms. It can be hidden in the little ways you expect her to act, think, or speak, the subtle ways you try to mold her into your ideal partner. Maybe you want her to dress a certain way, to post less on social media, to avoid certain friends, to adopt your values prematurely. And when she resists, you interpret it as disrespect, rather than as a sign that she is simply her own person. But here's the truth. When you try to reshape a young woman's identity to ease your own insecurities, You're not loving her, you're controlling her. And nothing kills attraction faster than the realization that you don't love her for who she is, you love her for how she makes you feel. That's not love, that's dependency. You've turned her into an emotional crutch, a fantasy figure you use to soothe your internal emptiness. And sooner or later, that burden becomes too heavy for her to carry. She'll begin to withdraw. She'll spend more time with people who make her feel free. She'll stop answering as quickly, stop being as open, and eventually she'll be gone. And the man left behind isn't the strong, grounded masculine figure he believed himself to be. He's the man who couldn't stand alone. The harsh reality is that no amount of emotional attachment or possessive behavior can make someone stay who doesn't want to. You can't guilt a young woman into loyalty. You can't argue her into submission. And you certainly can't love her so hard that she forgets her desire for independence. The more emotionally dependent you become, the more power she holds over you. And power, when given without earned respect, is always abused, even unintentionally. When a young woman knows she can control your mood, your confidence, and your behavior by simply withholding attention or affection, she has no reason to admire you. She sees you not as a man, but as an emotional puppet, one that dances for her approval. True masculine energy is not afraid of loss. It doesn't cling, it doesn't chase, and it doesn't beg for reassurance. It creates a space of stability that invites love but doesn't collapse without it. If a young woman wants to be in your life, she will stay not because she's trapped, but because she feels secure in your presence and inspired by your strength. But if your presence is filled with pressure, your love tainted with fear, your communication laced with control, you become the very thing she needs to escape from. The goal isn't to hold her tightly. The goal is to be so centered in yourself that she never wants to leave. And that only happens when you let go of the need to possess and begin mastering the art of letting things come and go without losing yourself in the process. So, understand this: your value as an older man is not measured by how tightly you can hold on to a young woman, how much you give, or how much you sacrifice to keep her interested. It's measured by how deeply you know yourself, how calmly you hold your ground, and how fearlessly you can walk away when your peace is threatened. You are not here to compete with youth, to beg for attention, or to mold someone into who you think they should be. You are here to embody wisdom, to lead with quiet strength, and to live with self-respect that doesn't bend for temporary affection. If she truly values you, she will rise to meet your standards, and if she doesn't, let her go. Because the moment you lose yourself trying to keep someone, you've already lost everything that made you worth keeping.